A lot of people looked at the Edmonton Oilers bringing back Colton Dach on a 2-year contract and immediately dismissed it as just another routine offseason signing. I think that's a mistake. Here's what I'm hearing around the league. This deal wasn't simply about keeping another depth forward under contract. It was about protecting something the Oilers believe became obvious after they acquired him at the trade deadline. They think Colton Dach gives them an element their roster desperately needs if they're serious about taking another run at the Stanley Cup. The contract itself isn't going to dominate headlines. 2 years at an average annual value of $1.2 million is hardly the kind of deal that shakes the NHL. But here's how I read this situation. Teams don't hand out contracts just because they like a player's personality or because he had a handful of decent games, especially not a team like Edmonton where every dollar matters because of the salary cap and because so much money is already committed to stars like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Every roster spot has to serve a purpose, and from what I've been told, the Oilers believe Dach has already proven exactly what his purpose can be. To understand why this signing matters, you have to go back to the trade deadline. Edmonton wasn't just looking for scoring. Everyone already knew they had elite offensive talent. What they were searching for was a different identity lower in the lineup. They wanted players who could survive the grind of playoff hockey, players who could finish checks, win battles along the boards, create space for skilled teammates, and make life miserable for opposing defensemen over a 7-game series. That's where Colton Dach entered the picture. The former second-round pick had spent time with the Chicago Blackhawks, but he never truly established himself as an offensive force there. Looking only at his scoring totals, it's easy to wonder why Edmonton saw something worth investing in. But NHL teams have become much better at identifying value beyond goals and assists. They evaluate puck battles, forechecking pressure, physical engagement, defensive responsibility, and the ability to maintain possession in difficult situations. That's often where players separate themselves, especially on championship-caliber teams. League sources indicate that Edmonton's coaching staff appreciated those details almost immediately after Dach arrived. He wasn't trying to become Connor McDavid. He wasn't trying to score highlight reel goals every night. Instead, he embraced the role the team needed him to play, and that's something coaches notice very quickly. The latest information I'm hearing is that Edmonton loved the way Dach attacked every shift with purpose. At 6'4" and over 215 pounds, he possesses the type of frame that simply can't be taught. Size alone doesn't guarantee success in today's NHL, but when it's combined with effort and physical commitment, it becomes a real weapon. That's exactly what the Oilers believe they're developing. One statistic really jumped out at me when I started digging deeper into his season. Colton Dach finished with 219 hits despite playing only 61 games between Chicago and Edmonton. Think about that for a second. He ranked among the NHL leaders in hits while appearing in significantly fewer games than many of the players around him on that list. That's not just physical hockey. That's relentless physical hockey. My take on this is that those numbers explain the contract more than his point totals ever could. You don't accidentally deliver nearly 220 hits in a season. That reflects a player's identity. It tells you how he approaches every shift, every puck battle, every forecheck, and every defensive zone retrieval. The Oilers aren't paying for the goals he scored. They're paying for the pressure he creates. After arriving in Edmonton, Dach's offensive production actually showed encouraging signs. In just 8 regular season games with the Oilers, he recorded 2 goals and 2 assists while continuing to play the heavy style that originally attracted management. Were those numbers spectacular? No. But they demonstrated something important. He looked comfortable in Edmonton's system almost immediately. That matters because trade deadline acquisitions don't always adjust quickly. Some players struggle to fit into a new locker room, a new coaching system, or different line combinations. Dach didn't appear overwhelmed. Instead, he looked like someone eager to prove he belonged. Of course, things weren't completely smooth. A lower body injury interrupted his momentum and forced him to miss time shortly after joining the organization. That's never ideal, particularly for a player trying to establish himself with a new team during the most important stretch of the season. But from what I've been told, the Oilers remained impressed with how he handled the recovery process and how quickly he returned ready to contribute. When he came back, it wasn't about chasing personal statistics. It was about helping the team win hockey games. That mentality carried directly into the playoffs. His offensive numbers during the postseason weren't eye-popping, but that's not why he was in the lineup. Edmonton trusted him to play difficult minutes, finish checks, keep opposing defenders under pressure, and provide energy whenever his line jumped over the boards. Those aren't always the plays plays that appear on highlight shows, but coaches value them immensely because they wear opponents down over the course of a long playoff series. Here's something else worth paying attention to. The Oilers are clearly trying to build a roster that isn't entirely dependent on skill. We've seen over the past several postseasons that the teams making the deepest runs usually combine elite talent with relentless physical depth. Florida has done it. Vegas did it. Other recent contenders followed a similar formula. Edmonton appears to be taking that lesson seriously. That's why I don't think this contract should be viewed in isolation. Instead, I see it as another piece of a much larger organizational strategy. Management isn't simply rewarding Dach for what he already accomplished. They're betting on what he can become over the next 2 years, and considering he's still only 23 years old, there's every reason to believe his best hockey could still be ahead of him. One reason I think this story has flown under the radar is because people naturally focus on the biggest names in Edmonton. Every conversation starts with Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, or the latest blockbuster rumor. That's understandable. Those players drive the franchise. But championship teams aren't built by stars alone. They're built by finding value throughout the lineup, and here's how I see this situation. The Oilers believe Colton Dach can become one of those value pieces that quietly changes the complexion of their roster. There's another layer to this story that shouldn't be overlooked. Dach isn't just joining Edmonton, he's returning home. He grew up in St. Albert, Alberta, just outside Edmonton, and that hometown connection means something. Players often talk about the excitement and pressure that come with representing the team they watched growing up. It doesn't guarantee success, but it can provide another level of motivation. From what I've been told, the organization believes Dach embraces that responsibility rather than feeling overwhelmed by it. My take is that hometown players usually understand exactly what hockey means in a market like Edmonton. They know the expectations. They know how passionate the fan base is. They know every game will be analyzed from every possible angle. Some players struggle with that spotlight. Others thrive in it. The Oilers appear convinced that Dach belongs in the second category. Then there's the contract itself. 2 years at an average annual value of $1.2 million is the definition of a low-risk investment. In today's NHL salary cap environment, finding productive players at that price is incredibly valuable. Teams simply don't have the luxury of overpaying every depth player, especially contenders trying to maximize every dollar around expensive superstars. League executives constantly talk about surplus value. That's when a player provides more on the ice than his contract suggests he should. Edmonton clearly believes Dach has a chance to become exactly that kind of player. If he continues developing into a dependable physical forward who can contribute secondary offense while playing responsible hockey, this contract could look like one of the better bargains on the roster. That's why I don't think the organization views this as merely keeping a familiar face around. They're making a calculated bet on future growth. Age is another reason for optimism. Dach is only 23 years old, and power forwards often develop later than smaller, skill-first players. It isn't unusual to see bigger forwards take longer to learn how to use their size consistently at the NHL level. Timing, positioning, confidence, and decision-making all improve with experience. That's why many of the league's most effective physical forwards didn't fully establish themselves until their mid-20s. Here's what I'm hearing from people around the league. They don't necessarily expect Dach to become a top-line scorer, and that's perfectly fine. His value comes from complementing skilled players, creating momentum through physical play, extending offensive zone possessions, and making opponents work every single shift. Those contributions don't always dominate the score sheet, but they often influence games in ways casual fans don't immediately recognize. I also think it's important to remember how quickly circumstances changed for him. Earlier in his career with Chicago, opportunities weren't always consistent, and expectations shifted as the organization continued its rebuilding process. Sometimes a change of scenery gives a player exactly what he needs. Different teammates, different coaching philosophies, and a different competitive environment can completely reshape a career. Edmonton presents a unique opportunity because the expectations are crystal clear. The Oilers aren't rebuilding, they're chasing the Stanley Cup. Every player entering that locker room understands the mission from day one. Roles are defined, accountability is high, and everyone is expected to contribute in whatever way helps the team win. That's where Dach's playing style fits naturally. When I watched his games after the trade, one thing stood out more than anything else. He wasn't trying to do too much. He kept his game simple. He finished checks. He protected pucks. He worked below the goal line. He created discomfort for opposing defenders. Those habits earned trust from coaching staffs, especially in playoff hockey where mistakes become magnified. The playoff sample itself wasn't huge, but I think it told us something meaningful. Even after missing time with a lower body injury, Dach returned and played the type of hockey Edmonton expected. He wasn't chasing individual milestones. He was focused on helping the team however he could. That's exactly the mentality contenders want from their depth players. Another factor worth considering is roster continuity. Every offseason brings uncertainty, especially for teams operating close to the salary cap. Keeping players who already understand the system reduces the adjustment period heading into a new season. Instead of spending training camp teaching a new acquisition how to fit into the lineup, the coaching staff can focus on refining details and building chemistry.